see you. And I can see one of the differences between the Durban equip and the other equips we've had. It's very organized. I shan't be going over 5 minutes past 2. There's no ways. Stevie told us that there were other equips happening in KZN right now, but they're happening all over the country, if you didn't know that. I'm en route to Joburg. Those guys have been meeting since Wednesday. And we've had them in Cape Town and Klerksdorp and Bloemfontein and Port Elizabeth. Nelspruit next week. Really exciting, eh? So, the topic that I have been given is evolving leadership dynamics amidst growth. And the reason I was given that topic is that Stan heard me speak at a church planters a little while ago, and this was one of the issues in the talk. And so if you are not an elder on an eldership team, wave at me. Whoa! Well, there's a reason that God's got you here. So I'm talking as if you are elders. I'm talking as if you are church planters. I'm talking as if you are governing local churches. And I trust that's going to be helpful for you. It will at least give you an insight into what your eldership teams are doing. Or maybe God has got something on your life that somewhere down the future you're going to be doing something like that. And so essentially what this topic says in a nutshell is that as your church grows, you've got to change. Generally speaking, you've got to change before it grows. Not only do you have to change for it to grow, is that as your church grows, it changes. It feels different. It looks different. And you're going to understand that God makes things grow. That's what it says in 1 Corinthians chapter 3. So if He makes it grow, growth isn't bad. I can remember preaching at a church once many years ago, and fast forward 5 years, one of the elders from that church arrived in Pietermaritzburg and was at our looking in class. And so I saw this elder there, and I said, hey, hang on a minute. Last time I saw you, you were at this other church. He said, yeah, I moved. I'm here in Maritzburg. I said, well, welcome to Maritzburg. When did you move? So he said, 2 years ago. I said, 2 years ago? You were an elder there, right? He says, yes. I said, it's taking you a long time to get to our looking in. He says, well, you weren't the first church I tried. Now, the reason his pastor had asked me to go down there was to help them wrestle through growth, actually. So I said, yo, why, do you mind me asking why I wasn't, leading the first church you tried? He says, oh, because my pastor said to me, Maritzburg is full of very nice churches. But whatever you do, don't go to One Life Church. I said, you kidding me now? This is a friend of mine, who said this. So I said, do you mind me asking, did he give you a reason? And his reason was this. He says, see, because it's a big church and they've got all the bases covered. What you need to do is you need to go to a small church, because in the small church, they're going to need your worship gift. They're going to need your preaching gift. And so rather go to a small church. So I said, well, how did that go for you? He says, well, I'm here, aren't I? I said, okay, no more needs to be said. That's it. So this is the thing. Big church is not necessarily good church, but small church is also not necessarily good church. Size does affect what a church is like, but size should not impede and impinge on the health of a church. You see, this pastor that had sent his elder to Maritzburg, or, advised his elder when he came into Maritzburg, wanted desperately to see his church grow, to see his church thrive. But inside, he has this sneaky suspicion that big is bad. And I've watched that guy. He doesn't know that I've told this story maybe 20 times around the universe. But you don't even know what, universe he came from. But I've watched that guy from that day to now. His church is stuck at a certain size, and I'm absolutely certain it's because deep in his heart he has a suspicion that when his church really does grow, he's going to betray his values. It's not going to be authentic, and it's not going to be cool. And so what I'd like to do is I would like to give you a grid that I stumbled into years ago. I don't even remember where from. Pretty sure I didn't think of it myself. So somewhere out there I got it. And it's been very helpful for me to look at how a church grows. Now let's just talk about the concept of your adjusting ecclesiology, your model changes. Where does the Bible speak into that and allow that? Well, I think that you can read it the whole way through the New Testament. But when Jesus was speaking, I think it's Matthew chapter 9, about the vibrancy of faith, he was saying, nobody takes new wine and pours it into old wineskins, because if they do, the wineskins will burst and be ruined, and the wine will spill out. If the wineskins describe how we do church, and the wine describes the move of God, the Spirit of God, the work of God, he's saying, if the way we do church becomes static, stale, and religious, when God's power hits it, the church is going to be hurt. It's going to be ruined. It's going to split. And actually the move of God's going to be dissipated. And so I think it's important that we understand that. I need to make this one qualifier before I carry on. Those of you who are looking for some exegesis today, you're not going to get it from this very practical subject. Basically, I'm going to be leaning on what I've observed as I've looked at churches wrestling with this issue of fruitfulness and growth, staying true to their faith, true to the doctrines that they love, true to their values, and keeping their relationships intact. And so this is the illustration, and then I'm going to break it down, and hopefully it gives you some handles as eldership teams to talk about. Church growth and the way that church happens can be likened to sport. So when you plant a church, there's not very many people on the field, so it can't be rugby, can't be football. It's more like being a decathlete. You know what a decathlete does? Does everything himself. He jumps the high jump, he throws he does. If you watch it in the Olympics, it was actually riveting in the Olympics. One person does everything. So you plant a church and like you preaching, your wife's leading worship, the dog is the audience, your kid is doing children's church with your baby, and that's it. That's it. And so it's very lonely, but it's a reality. Then what happens is you start to gather some people with you, and your church ceases to be just a family on a mission, a decathlete. It looks more like a golf game. Now, golf, what's unique about golf is that you might be doing it with other people, but you're playing with your own ball. For those of you who are not golfers, it's not appropriate to mess with another guy's golf ball. It's basically you playing your own game, and you're just doing it along with somebody else. And so when you gather your first group of people, most people have decided to join you. They're not involved in other churches. This is if they are believers, because they like to walk by themselves. They've heard that they should be in a church, so they've hooked up with you. But essentially, you're doing life together. You're doing faith together. But basically, they have got no sense of team or sense of togetherness. They're just doing life with you. But then and that takes your church up to about, just bigger than our own group, maybe 20, 30 people. But if you want that group to grow from 20 to maybe 100, up to 80 to 60, some fundamental changes have got to take place so drastically that the people who've signed up to play golf can't recognize what you're doing. For you to take a group of people from 20 to take them to 100, you've got to start to lead. You've got to be a visionary. You've got to look into the future. You've got to build team. You've got to get guys on a mission together with you. You've got a common goal. It's not like golf, everybody deciding exactly how they're going to play the game. It's more like basketball. Everybody's on the same court. Somebody's shouting and screaming. And the guy who signed up for golf says, who the heck? I didn't sign up for this. Why are you shouting at me like that? Just let me get on with what I want to do. No. We're going somewhere. No, I didn't sign up for that. And what you will find is that when your church moves from like 10, 15, 20 up to 80, you're going to lose a lot of people who signed up for golf. And what's required in those stages of moving from golf to basketball is visionary leadership. It's establishing of a core team of leaders around you so that you can share the responsibility and to understand community and understand team and those dynamics. Very exciting. But I would guess that most of you in this building would fall into a category of decathlon, golf, or basketball. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Otherwise, Heather's going to be after me. And I'll tell you why I think most of you are in that category, because 96% of the churches in the world are under 200. And I'm talking about 200 attendance. I'm not talking about 200 on the database. I've been around pastors long enough to know when the topic comes up. I say, how many people are at your church? And they say, like 500. 500? When did you last look at your database? Oh, no, I just add people. Yeah, so 500 people have come over the last 20 years, but it's not a 500-strong church. And so what I would like to speak about primarily this morning, because it's such a radical shift, and some of you might be saying, God, you've settled it for me today. As I'm leading my church, I never want to go beyond 150, 200 on a Sunday, because that's not in me. Or you're going to look at it and you're going to say, okay, I can see God can be anything like that. But one of the things I think as leading a church we've got to understand is that, in the early church, God added thousands in a day. And he didn't have a brain fade that day. It's not like it was unhealthy. God's plan is revival. God's plan is people getting saved. God's plan is multitudes being looked after. And in 96% of the cases of the world, they're in small groups, homes, little cottages, little halls, all over the planet. But there are moments where there's a different expression of church where it's bigger than that. And it's not bad. Can be bad, but not necessarily bad. But it's very traumatic to move from 150 people beyond, and I'll explain to you why. So traumatic, let's change our sport analogy. You're no longer playing basketball, and I must have got this originally from an American, because the next illustration is gridiron football. It's so traumatic, it's nothing like basketball, it's more like American football. Now, the difference between basketball and American football is like in American football, there's like more than 80 people on a team. There's multiple coaches, there's multiple captains, in fact, there's a whole defense team, and there's a whole attack team. There's even the kicking team. And they've got the kicking, those guys, I actually don't know why those guys put helmets and padding on. Because they called on kick, and then they run off that field as fast as they can run. Each team has its own psychologists. Like if you're part of the running chaps who's supposed to catch the touchdown to the score, they teach you how to get away from the big, fat, scary guys. And if you are part of the defenders, they've got psychologists teaching you how to take these oaks out. I think there's some guys on a team who don't even know each other's names. And you say, is basketball better than gridiron? No, it's just different. just different. And if you're going to take on a city with thousands of people versus take on a village with a few dozen people, that's going to look different. Now, I'm going to give you 6 major differences. So if you find yourself, that's essentially what Stan asked me to preach about today, I think, is that if you find yourself playing basketball and you're saying, God, how can it be healthy for us to grow? Firstly, how can we change? How can we change how we're doing church? How can we get ready for it? And how, when we go, when God begins to add numbers to what we're doing, how does that stay healthy? That's the question. And so the first thing, let me read them out to you in case I don't make it. You've got to move. This is the change that's necessary. You've got to move from community to communities in your understanding. You've got to move from generalists to specialists. You've got to have the priesthood of all believers on steroids, in the nice sense. Mission at every level. You're going to move from visionary to visionaries. Very traumatic for the lead guy. And you've got to move from informal to formal communications, and that's the one most people freak out about. So let's say move from community to communities. Years back, I did some studies, and we had to read all sorts of material that I wouldn't ordinarily read. And I read this anthropological survey. Anthropology is the study of human origins. And it basically looked at primitive societies like Aborigines and Eskimos and Pygmies, and basically said they still hunter-gatherer societies. And so they're the closest thing to what we know is in its essence in the human makeup. Move away all modernity, move away all social media, move away all modern constructs, and you get to the essence of humanity. Can we learn something of the commonality between these hunter-gatherer societies? And this was the finding. The average size of a hunter-gatherer society is 147.2. And so what happens when the community gets to a certain size, an alpha male moves off, or an alpha female, depending on who you're looking at, moves off and starts another community. And so basically, this argument behind this anthropology study was that in the human makeup, we don't do well in community beyond 150 people. And it used to back up its argument the size of fighting battalions, the size of local churches. It looked at all these things. And basically, when a group gets beyond 150, people start to say, I can't really connect to that community. That group is too big. And so I think Jesus understood that. When he fed the 5,000, he preached to 5,000, didn't he? But as soon as he wanted them to have community, to eat together, what did he do? He put them in groups of 50s and 100s. And one of them, Gospel says, and they sat on the green grass. I love that it was green. So he puts them in groups of 50s and 100s. This is how you eat together. This is how you do community together. Because you can't have friends with 5,000 people. And so if you have, I'm talking to the elders now, and the lead elders, if your sense of community that you're building is based on your Sunday gathering, you are going to 150. You're going to grow that thing to 180 to 200. Blanc, it's going to go down to 140. You're going to say it's winter time. No, it's not. It might have something to do with anthropology. It's going to go up again. Why? Because God wants to bless you with new people getting saved. And it's going to clank down at 150. Because people are going to say this. If that is your primary building block, if Sunday is where if I had to ask someone in your church, tell me about your church community, and they say, oh, on Sundays, we have egg and bacon rolls. We all sit there together, and it's like, it's so cool. And he goes straight to Sunday. It's brilliant. It's what 96% of the churches in the world do, and do it well. But if you're wanting to have healthy community beyond 150, you've got to think communities, not community. And so it's critical on a Sunday All your teams, like your media teams, your children's church teams, your band teams, all your volunteer teams all over the place on a Sunday, that they are teams within teams. That they find community within their team, because when they're invaded by another 500 people, they have their community. But way more important than Sunday is your small groups. Because that is where people feel they belong. And so small groups are not a good idea. They are a God idea. If you look at the 3,000 that were added in the early church, almost immediately it says, and they met in each other's homes. And they broke bread in each other's homes. For you to have a community that doesn't come on a Sunday, because I tell you what happens, if you ignore this and you say my primary building block is Sunday, what's going to happen is that people are going to start saying things like this. The pastor thinks he's high and mighty now, isn't going to have time for me. This used to be a friendly church, not friendly anymore. You're just like a number now. This church is no longer a family, it's becoming corporate. Let's go down the road and find a church that's a real family. I remember the days when we were a real family. You know what they're saying? They're not saying that God doesn't want to grow a church. What they're saying is they don't feel connected. You've got to be able to move from community to communities. So let me wind back now to the golfer and to the basketball player. If you have a sneaky suspicion one day God's going to get you into gridiron, start with connect groups or home groups. I have a friend who planted a church in Johannesburg. He was on eldership with us. And he said this for the first 5 years of leading his church. He's in Johannesburg, busy place. And so what he used to say was, listen, I know Joburg's busy. I'm from wherever, I'm a bit of a country bumpkin sort of a guy. So I'm going to come to all the meetings. But if you have to choose a meeting, please boycott Sunday, go to home group. That guy's now running multiple meetings on a Sunday. He's got multiple hundreds of people. Why? Because the people have been connected in communities, not community. It doesn't mean you stop doing bacon and egg rolls on a Sunday. It doesn't mean you stop community on a Sunday. It means that your primary building block is communities, not community. And that requires a radical adjustment. And so I've been leading the church that I lead now for 25 years. I'm still leading home groups. Why? Not because I'm not busy enough, because I know that this value is so important. In fact, there's sometimes when I'm down in Cape Town where I lead 2 home groups, one on a Wednesday, one on a Thursday, because I want people to catch how important it is to do faith in your living rooms. I want people, when they're connected, not to connect primarily with me, but to be immersed into the body, into the family, into the community of God. And so some of us, when we plant churches and we put all our eggs in that Sunday basket, if we could just get Sunday right. If you haven't understood communities, 150. Or, if you're a brilliant preacher, you will fill the hall, but it's not really a life-giving church. It's an audience. So there are some churches that are massive, that don't have small groups, but basically they're preaching halls. If you don't want to betray your values and you don't want to betray your understanding of healthy church, you've got to move from community to communities. Got that? Next, you've got to move from a thinking of generalist to specialist. Now, some of you are, shaking right now while I'm talking to you, saying, this sounds way too corporate. Where's this in the Bible? When Jesus was discipling his early church leaders, he turned them into all-rounders, didn't he? They did a little bit of healing, a little bit of event coordinating, a little bit of tidying up afterwards, a little bit of outreach, a little bit of discipleship, a little bit of miracle working. But they were called disciples. They were like all-rounders. But he adds 3,000 to the church, then he adds 5,000 to the church, and then Paul, under the instruction of the Holy Spirit, writes Ephesians chapter 4, and he says this, we don't just need disciples now, it is he who descended, who ascended, who gave to the church apostles, prophets, pastors, teachers, evangelists. What do you think Keir Taylor's doing over there? And Mandel's doing over there right now. And Brent Brading's about to go and do just now. To equip the saints for acts of service. That's a specialist that's been included. This is the illustration I give my elders so that they understand. If you're going to medicate a village, a GP will do. There's probably doctors in here, and you're going to come and crucify me afterwards. If you're a little bit sick, you go to that guy. A little bit of headache, you go there. A little bit pregnant, you go there. A little bit of a broken leg, you go there. He's a GP, and he's essential. If you're going to medicate a city, thousands of people, you don't line up 100 GPs. You build a hospital. There's a pediatric ward, a psychiatric ward, a geriatric ward. GPs are wandering around, but they're specialists in there. Now you're saying, oh, God, I really don't like your illustration. I much prefer my GP to a cold clinical hospital. One is not better than the other. They're just different. I'll tell you what, I have been medicated for 50-something years. I'm 56 now. Been to a GP many times. No way ever in my 56 years has a GP ever tucked me into bed, ever given me a bed bath, praise the Lord for that, never given me ice cream and jelly before I went to sleep, never wiped my brow when I had a fever. All that has happened in a hospital for me. Don't tell me a GP is more loving than a specialist. It's just different. And so as your church begins to grow, if all you do is make everybody that's in leadership responsible for everything, you're going to send some dude off to look after the children who hates kids. Why would you do that? Send somebody to go and organize stuff who can't even organize a party in Disneyland. Why would you do that? Put someone on the stage to sing because shame, she needs a turn. Why would you do that? That wouldn't be acceptable in a hospital. And so I say, God, I don't like this. No, I'm not saying you replace the GPs. I say when the thing grows, you add the specialists. And so what does that look like? Well, this is how it looks. You need to be able to see the gifting in people. Mary, Martha, Lazarus. Very different siblings. Lazarus, every time you see him, he's reclining. He's the one Jesus loved. He's the friend of Jesus. Shame, he died, and everybody's crying about him because he loved. Jesus loved to go to that house. Lazarus lived there, in Bethany, Martha's house. Why did he love to go there? He knew some dude was going to be reclining next to him. Going to be he's setting the tone of the party, Lazarus. Mary doesn't even know you came. She is lost in worship, strolling around barefoot, tie-dyed shirt. All her savings are being thrown at Jesus' feet. She is hanging on every single word. She's the only one in the universe. She's lost. Jesus loved to go to that house because Mary was worshiping there. And then Martha, she owned the joint. Jesus loved to go there because he knew he wasn't going to get food poisoning there. There was a dishwashing system in place. There were people being delegated to. Jesus went to this house where there's worship, where there's love, where there's logistics, hard work going, and he celebrated it. You know, God, I think he liked Mary more. Those are all the Marys speaking. You go and see the Gospels. It says he loved Martha and her sister Mary. He weeps when he sees the mourning over Lazarus. It's an amazing thing. And so you've got to ask God as a leader how to celebrate the differences in people. So I've got guys on our team. I'm wired in a certain way. And I realized that everybody who's not wired in me was just like getting overlooked, bypassed, joining another church. And we stopped being there on that point. Put the priesthood on steroids. Involvement makes people feel like they belong. So the bigger your church gets, the more roles you need to invent. When we started doing multi-site, we had a guy on our team called Russell Eels. And I said to Russell, I want you to look at all the stuff that happens on a Sunday, and I want you to invent as many as you can, extra. He said, why? We're having enough trouble filling up the spots at the moment. I said, just invent more. He invented 53 functions. Worship is one function. Children's ministry is another function. The musos are another function. He had another 50 of them. And we used that model for like decades because our thing was we want to make a space. Now, that's not the sum total of why God created that person. But as they roll up their shoulders, sleeves, they can see I'm rushing. They feel like they're involved. I tell our people as they join our new members class, you can come to my house, you can just stand on my veranda and say hello to me. You can come into my lounge and watch TV, watch a rugby with me. You know, bring some biltong, leave when you expect it to leave. But there's a different sort of person that comes to my house. The ones who come uninvited, in my kitchen, straight to my fridge before they say hello to me. Those generally are called my brothers, sisters, uncles, cousins. Definitely my kids. That's family. So I think as elders, our role is to show people the doorways from the veranda into the lounge. The lounge is just attending a meeting. Attending a meeting doesn't mean they're involved in your church. If you come to my house over rugby, we've got a lot of people watching rugby at our house. Yeah, you join the program, lift your hands, sit down again. Shout at the program. If you don't come next week, we're going to say, where's that dude? It wasn't quite the same. You can join church like that, but that's not really what the New Testament had in mind. That's not healthy church. Healthy church is family, getting into the kitchen. You need to show them the door into the kitchen, and one of the doors into the kitchen is small groups. Another door into the family kitchen is volunteering, helping. Incidentally, we don't use that word volunteer. We use the word serving. Mission at every level. I'm going to have to just mention some of these. Mission, we're talking about seeing people saved. Preachers, you should expect every time you preach, unless it's in a leadership environment, every time you preach, people to get saved. No matter what course you're doing. Because mission happens on Sunday, mission happens midweek, mission happens with testimonies. If you're going to keep it healthy, people have got to getting saved. There is something so beautiful about looking at a farm field with all the sheep in it, with the little lambs running around, don't you think? See a field where there's no lambs running around? I've got one thought in my mind. Those sheep are heading on the way to the butcher. For a community to be healthy, you've got to see new life. And so mission, very important. I said this caused people concern. You're going to move from informal to formal communications. Listen, when Jesus was on earth, he didn't write anything down. Why? Because he was playing basketball. He was working with some disciples. Maybe he wrote in the sand when a woman was being martyred or executed. But as soon as he adds 3,000, 5,000, suddenly we've got the New Testament. Just because it's formal, you actually remember what you said in your meeting. You actually, write things down, organize things, doesn't mean it's bad. I write poetry. Some of you won't believe that, but I only write poetry for one person. That's my wife. Because she doesn't laugh at me. Now you tell me, is what I say to you in person more loving than a letter that I write? It's not, it's just different. So one of the most loving things you can do as the crowds come in is to be organized. To honor people, start on time. Check, you actually down here at the beach are getting very quiet on that one. The last one, and I got like 2 minutes to finish it. You need to move from visionary to visionaries. If the church I lead depended on me for every visionary thought, we would still be in a school hall. Talking to lead guys right now. A visionary is someone who sees something. The creativity of God is in them. Not only can they see it, that's just a dreamer, it's someone who is able to enlist people to go there, to inspire people to go there, and people follow in their droves. If you want to lead a healthy biblical community, you need lots of those guys. You've heard this said in leadership training. 2 visions equals. In basketball, that's correct. 2 visions equals division in basketball, because you've got 1 hoop. But in gridiron, you need multiple visionaries. Then the job of the main visionary is to make sure all the visionaries are running in the same direction. Very scary. Can I say one thought about that? You need a visionary over your kids. You need a visionary over your worship. You need a visionary over your small groups. You need a visionary over mission. You need a visionary over... You need a visionary everywhere you look. You want people to come up with new ideas, hearing God, and then this is how you lead them. You don't climb over a visionary and instruct how he does it. You pull them close relationally, and you let go functionally. That's how you lead visionaries. Let's stand together. For those of you who are not on eldership teams, I hope you survived. And I hope you take away this one thought, actually. Small is not bad, necessarily, and big is not bad, necessarily. When God's building His church, and we're doing it His way, and we're open to change, we're open to adjust the way we're doing it, it'll be healthy. If He governs that change, it'll be healthy. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for these wonderful people and your beautiful church that you've allowed us to be part of. I pray as we go on this journey together, that you would build your church and that you would lead us in your ways. In Jesus' name, amen.